Hello everyone, it's time for this week's live stream. Let's make sure I did everything right and that the intro worked. I have some things I want to talk about. We're going to talk about aquarium lighting today, but I want to drop in a couple of other topics or brief thoughts before we get into the main topic. Hi Nitrox, you were first! Hi Lynn, hi Andrea, Elmer's here, Amar's here, Paul, nearly first. Top 10. Hi Bill, hi Synthetic Reef. So audio seems okay, I guess. I am actually out of AA batteries, so if this microphone goes dead, we're going to have to resort to using the one built into the Mac later on in this show. We'll see what happens. Thank you for letting me know about the audio. Okay, I want to talk about something I saw recently, and I've been meaning to mention it on this stream as a warning to all, do not do this. And at first I thought, wow, that's kind of a smart idea. And then I found out and I was like, no, it's a terrible idea. And I even called someone for information. So what happened was someone found a UV light on Amazon that's just the bulb with a cord. And he took it and he put it inside his overflow box. And the idea was that he could put it in there and it would kill all the Aptasia and all the pests and all the vermitids and everything. And it worked. And I was like, oh my God, that was actually kind of brilliant. However, as we know, you should never look into UV light, so there's a risk. And he says, no, it's fine. It's inside the overflow box. It's black. I can't see it. And it worked. It was a miracle. And I thought, wow, this guy might be onto something. And then he moved it down into his sump to kill the pests down there. And that's when things went wrong. And like I said, at first I thought, well, that's just dangerous because if you open the cabinets, you're looking into the light. And he says, nope, it's fine. I got it closed up and covered and no one can look in there. It's totally safe. I'll unplug it if I have to open the doors. I thought, okay. And then it was a few days later, there was a picture of a sump in the group and it was completely crazed. I mean, it just looked so bad. I thought some kind of chemical was used on the outside, like Windex, and it just put a million cracks in the acrylic. I mean, the entire panel was just crazed. And he says, no, I had a UV light in there. And I thought, I don't think that would happen. So I called Tulio from Reef because he's a lighting expert. And he says, absolutely that would happen. So it crazed everything the light could reach. I was like, oh, I better mention this on the live stream. Because, you know, we don't want pests. We don't want Aptasia. We don't want worms and sponges and whatever growing in the sump or growing in the overflow boxes. Many of you are worried about any kind of pest under the sun. For me, if they're in the overflow box or if they're in the sump, it's not as much a risk as it is in the display tank. I mean, that's not where I want them. So the idea of jamming a UV in there to just kind of irradiate everything was kind of smart at first, but then I started thinking about, well, what does it do to the silicone? What does it do to the seams? What does it do to an acrylic tank? It probably won't affect a glass tank as much, but it could affect the overflow box. It could actually weaken the material a little tiny bit. Not all the way. It's not going to just explode. But it's something just to keep in mind in case you stumble across this. Don't do it because it ruined his sump. He can't even look through the sidewall. It's worse than my frag tank, and I complain about my frag tank all the time because the inside of mine got ruined with calcification where it's like orange peel texture, and I can't see through the acrylic no matter how well I clean it. It's just messed up forever. So I have to replace that tank. But first I got to take care of the anemone cube, which, you know, before that I got to take care of the building. So there's a list of things I always have to do. But anyway, just want to give you a heads up on that one in case you come across it or you see someone else talking about this. Give them a heads up. We don't want this to happen. All right. Second brief topic, very controversial. Star Wars. I have been watching Star Wars my whole life, and I love it. And it's one of those things where I've watched every single movie, and I enjoy them all. I actually don't dislike any of them. And there are certain characters people dislike, and I don't dislike the characters. And the whole thing is a story. And I've always felt if you're going to complain about this movie, make your own Star Wars movie and prove to us how great you are. But anyway, the point I wanted to mention was that, you know, I've always heard the debate of in what order should you watch it. Well, I haven't watched it in a very long time. Since the latest theatrical release, which was, you know, let's call it episode 9. You know, I've watched all the little intermediate shows and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't really watched them in, you know, succession. So I thought last night, I'm going to go ahead and put on episode 1 because on Disney Plus, they say in chronological order and they say start with 1, 2, 3, and work your way forward. And I'm watching episode 1, and I don't recommend that. I definitely think you need to start with episode 4, which was Star Wars A New Hope. That one was the original movie, what was that, 75, 77? You want to see that one first, then the Empire Strikes Back, and then Revenge of the Sith. You want to watch those in order, and then come to 1, 2, 3. And then you can watch 4, or shall we call it 4.5? 3.5, and then watch 7, 8, 9. And it's just because there's humor in the first movie that you wouldn't really understand if you didn't know things from movies 4, 5, and 6. So I do think you need to start, which seems weird, start in the middle and then wrap it all up. Okay, that was it. I just wanted to share my opinion. I'm sure the comments will be strong on this one, but there was just so many wonderful moments. I thought, man, if I was watching this brand new, like my grandson was watching this from the first movie forward, he would probably not get it. And then around episode 4 or 5, he'd be like, oh, or he'd have to go rewatch. So that's my thoughts. All right. When it comes to pump cleaning, I do recommend, we're switching back to aquariums. If you're trying to clean your aquarium's pumps, I do recommend that you have extras on hand. And this is a technique I've been doing for a very long time. This is a Vortec wet side that goes inside the aquarium, and then the outside is the motor. This is the MP40. I have MP40s and MP60s on my tanks. And if you have an extra one, when yours gets all dirty and corroded, you can just take it out of the tank, put the new clean one inside, and soak the old one for a duration, however long that's going to be, whether it's 20 minutes, 2 hours, overnight. But if you do that, you can swap things out. So if you have Jabo or Gyres or Vortex or Tunzi or whatever, Siche, there's so many different pumps on the market. If you can have an extra one on hand, it'll make your life so much easier because you don't have to like take your tank offline, so to speak. You can just take the pump out, put the clean one in, plug it in, back in operation, flow resumes, all is good in the world, and then take your time cleaning the other pump. And you can actually work them through rotation and just do pump by pump by pump. Okay, that was it. Let's go into the main topic today, which is aquarium lighting. And I thought, we should talk about this because there's a lot of questions about lighting, and there is a lot of opinions, like everything. And then there's some basic principles that are worth discussing. If you're newer to the hobby, this might be very good for you. If you've been in the hobby a long time, you might think you've got this covered already, or, you may learn something new. We'll see. But bottom line is, these days, pretty much everyone is using LED lighting. Some people are using T5s. There are a few holdouts that are using metal halides. I used the metal halide bulbs all the way until a year ago. And I switched to the LED lights over my tank pretty much, I think, May of last year. I didn't double check this, but I feel like it's been 12 months. And I had no reason to change because I liked my metal halides and they did a great job. But they added heat to the tank, and they didn't give me control over what color the tank was like you can with LED lighting. You can just switch things with an app or with a knob or unplug something else in. You can actually switch different spectrums. You have a lot of choices with LEDs, which is nice. So, if you're on the fence of what lighting to buy, we want to make sure you're buying the right lights for a reef tank and not just some off-the-shelf lights that you stumbled across, whether it's an Amazon deal, a fantastic deal from China, or you saw something at Petco or PetSmart and thought, oh, well, that's good enough. Some lights are not good enough. Some are just putting out a little bit of light, and that would be sufficient for a fish-only tank where you're not trying to grow anything. You're just feeding fish that are swimming in a circle. You just want to be able to see them. So if you are looking at a fixture that has, 6 or 10 little diodes, odds are that's not going to be nearly enough for a reef tank. But it would be enough for, to have a few decorative fish swimming around if that was your thing. But if you're trying to have anemones, clams, if you wanted to have corals that need light to grow, that would be softies all the way up to SPS corals. They are going to be more light hungry, more light demanding, and so they would need the higher end lights. Now, if you're growing a non-photosynthetic tank, which very few of you are, but there's always that 1 or 2 people that are doing something really neat. Those people are growing corals that don't need light. If they're used to living in total darkness, they don't need a special light fixture. You just need just enough light to see them, to take pictures of them, and to, be able to clean the tank. So you have some, you can save some money in that regard because you don't need something fancy. Now, the reason I talk about lighting today is because I saw Reef Builders shared some secret news that is rolling out. It actually comes out another day and a half. Hopefully they won't be mad at me. But Reef Builders shared the news. I am just repeating what I saw. It may not be true. The Radeon 6 is coming out on Monday. So if you are thinking of getting Radions from Ecotech Marine, those will become available shortly. If you already have Radeon Gen 5s, or if you have Gen 4s, you are still, you have nice lights over your tank. This is basically targeting brand new buyers, not trying to get you to upgrade your lighting like you would with a phone. So that's one fixture. Now Kessel, when I was at the Mini Macna in Atlanta a month ago, they have a brand new light out. I'm sorry, I don't remember the model number. I didn't memorize it. But they were 3-4 feet off the tank. They were crazy high with this cone that just shot the light down. So if you were hanging lights high up above your aquarium because of the way the ceiling is, or however you wanted your aesthetic for your tank, that would be kind of an interesting one, because so often we need our lights closer to the water. The average height for LED lighting tends to be about 10, 11 inches off the water. And so if you have this long tank and you have your lights just about this high above it, and then you have all the space above, you might say, I don't really like that look. Or you might say, no, that's exactly how I'd like it to be. However, I'm just saying that Kessel gives you kind of an option to where you could have lights up out of the way when you need to reach in the tank and work there. It's just gonna be shining in over your shoulder and give you some more free space, which I really do appreciate when I'm working in my own tank. And with my light rack that I've had over my reef tank now for so long, I actually set up to roll it out of my way, but it's already pretty high up. And I lowered it when I got my LED lighting to put my Sky fixtures at 11 inches off the water. So Sky is a brand I've been running for the last year that is from Neptune Systems. And it works with the Apex controller, but you don't have to own an Apex. You can actually use this light standalone. So you've got that choice. And another light fixture that I don't want to leave out is AI. They've been around a long time, Aqua Illumination, and they have a number of different lights on the market as well. So you have, those are just some that come to my mind. There are a ton of other ones that I don't even know all the names of the brands because I don't use them, I don't run into them, I don't have any experience with them, so I don't really talk about them. I know some of the moderators in Club Milo's Reef have found some very inexpensive ones that they're very happy with. And they can always tell you about those and give you more personal insight on how they operate, how they're controlling them. So let's talk about, okay, the benefit of LED lighting is you use less power than metal halides. The LED lights could last you many years. In theory, they should run 5 years without burning out. During that 5-year period, you could have some loss because they are wearing out gently, but they are gradually being consumed through use, through the flickering on and off so often of our lights through our, it's just, they don't go from working perfectly to suddenly they're worthless. They deteriorate very gradually. So if you have lights that are 3-4 years old, you are kind of thinking now is the time to start shopping around for new lighting. The benefit of LEDs is that you're not pouring a lot of heat into your tank, and so you may not discover you need a chiller. Actually, what you probably need is more heat. You may be running heaters more frequently, definitely during the night, to keep your tank's temperature up because you don't have the benefit of free heat coming off of metal halide bulbs. Now T5s, they actually do give off heat. They have to be about 7 inches off the water, and you have to replace them frequently. You don't get that 5-year duration. You're changing those bulbs out every 6 to 9 months. So there's a cost factor that's worth considering when you're shopping around for T5s, if that's the way you want to go. Also, the T5 look is different from LED and definitely different from metal halide. The T5 bulb is more fluorescent. Well, it is a fluorescent bulb, and it kind of gives you that even light all the way across. There's no shimmer. It does not have the feeling of being in a swimming pool with the sunlight, just making the ripples just go across the base of the pool. You don't see that at all with T5s. It's just a very specific, this is your color. It's lit all the way across, and that's the end of it. LEDs, the pinpoint of the lighting tends to go straight down, and it can come down in a cone, and the different manufacturers are doing different things to help spread it, or even to snap on a diffuser on there to equalize the light a little bit, to avoid what we used to talk about was a disco effect that you saw on the rock work and on the sand bed. The red and blues were just doing this thing on the sand. It was very distracting. It actually was irritating. And it was one of the reasons why I didn't switch to LEDs for a super long time, because those early years it was really bad. But it's gotten better. I've been running I ran metal halides on the Reef, and I ran the Radeon on my anemone cube for a number of years. I went from a Gen 2 to a Gen 4. The Gen 4 might be a Pro. And then on the frag tank, I ran Gen 3, and now I've got Gen 5s on there. So I've been using different Radions over the years and seeing how the tank looks under them. And I'm not seeing that disco effect that bothered me so much, like I said, with the older lighting. So I've got some experience with LED lighting and with growing corals under them, and it works. And I've been running this reef tank under my LEDs for the last year, so I've watched them grow, and you've seen it as well as you watch the videos. So we've got some proof of concept from a lot of people with aquariums. The old school debates that you can't grow corals under LEDs is dead. It's not even a myth, it's just false. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, what we do care about is how the corals are growing. Are they growing and staying colorful? Are they getting pale? Or are they turning pastel? Are they turning white? Are they turning brown? These are different things that can happen in different situations based on different things you're doing with your lighting. So if, for example, let's say you got an LED fixture and you've never used one before in your life, and you act like the light switch on your wall, on, off. So you just turn it on, it's at 100%, it's just putting peak intensity into your tank from the moment it turns on to the moment it turns off. If you do that, you'll probably end up with some white and later brown corals because you've cooked them. You've put them under way too much light for way too long. It's too much. So we want to be able to find that sweet spot. Now, some brands like the Radions have the acclimation period where you can actually tell it go into acclimation mode, and it'll reduce the lighting quite a bit as you've introduced your new corals. And then each week it ramps up mathematically a little bit more and a little bit more until I think, within 6 weeks or so, it's finally up to your maximum level that you've preset. And then if you were to introduce new corals in the tank, maybe you'd want to use acclimation mode again. The corals that are already in the tank, they can handle a little bit less light, but we don't want to cut their light off entirely, obviously, because we need them to continue growing. But the new coral, you don't want to nuke it. Now, there were different techniques back in the day for when you want to introduce a new coral in an existing reef. And one of the tricks, you would put egg crate across the top of the tank, which is, some people do that anyway to keep fish from jumping out. And then they would lay layers of screen on top of each other to create a shady spot directly over that brand new coral. And then every few days they'd take one layer of screen out, and so more and more light could shine through until finally all the screen was removed, and now the lighting's all equalized, and the brand new coral that's been in the tank for 2-3 weeks completely is acclimated because of this little technique of layering screen. So if you're wanting to do something like that, you definitely can, no matter what kind of light fixture you have. It's just a thought. One question that comes up a lot of times is, well, I want to switch from this type of lighting to this type. Like, I want to go from T5s to LEDs. I want to go from this brand of LEDs that I know isn't good enough to this brand that I heard is the best. Will my corals be shocked? They can be. And that's, like, again, we're talking about the intensity, the difference of light from what you had before to what you have now. So if you can get your hands on a par meter, that would be the best thing, because you can actually measure what the current levels are. And then when you put your new light on the tank, you can measure again and adjust the new light down to match the old one, and then gradually increase it a little bit each week over a period of 4 to 8 weeks till you get to the desired par level you'd like to be at. Like, for example, let's say you're watching a video on BRS and it said this coral tends to like 300 par, and you measure your tank and it's 80. You're like, whoa, wow. So you go out and you buy a brand new light fixture, and you're thinking, well, I definitely want to get more than 80. So you set it to maybe 100 par, and you watch and see how the corals do. and then you want to increase it to 110, 120 par, and then 140, and then 160. And you might want to at some point even find out, during your testing while you have this meter, well, what's the most my light can put out? And so you set the light to 100% and you measure. It's like, wow, it goes up to 500. I don't want that much. So now you know where you're aiming for. You can set the lighting to where it finally hits 300 par in that one spot, and you can then take note that's 58% of this light fixture. And then when you're setting up your tank, with your new light, you can say, well, I'm going to run it at 20%, but my goal will be to be up at 58% later. And that's kind of what I do with my tank. When I switched from metal halides to the sky, I had to measure what it was under 10K lighting, which is white light, and it's much brighter than blue lighting, which had lower par. And so I found the average between those two, because I ran my lights for an hour and a half in white light, and then I ran my lights for 4.5 hours in blue light. And so I want to know, what is that sweet spot? And then when I put the sky on there, I switched it to a white spectrum and did my measurement. Then I switched to a blue spectrum, did my measurement. I actually measured multiple times until I finally determined what look I liked. And then I went ahead and I looked at the overall intensity and brought it down to match the metal halide. Now, there are some people that, hands down, I just saw a guy named Alex was talking about this again because he was all upset about that. We're talking about LEDs. And he said, metal halide is the only way to go, and it's tested and proven, and your tank will never look the same if you don't have metal halide. I've heard the argument. It's okay. I've lived it. I used it forever. Okay, I'm happy with it. But I'm now with LEDs, and I'm happy with that too. So it's okay. But you have a wide range of all the color spectrums in a metal halide bulb, but there's going to be they are going to be designed for a very specific Kelvin. So when you buy a metal halide bulb, you're going to buy a 10,000 Kelvin or a 12,000 Kelvin or a 14,000 Kelvin or a 20,000 Kelvin bulb, and you can't dial it to 10K. It will be what it is, and it's on and it's off. But with LEDs, we can actually select with the apps on our phones or with your computer on your desktop or your tablet. You can say, I want 14K, or I want 14.5K, I want 18K, and you can pick it. And you could say, well, I want to start my day 18K, and then I want to change it to 14K during the middle of the day, and then I want to switch it back down to 20K as we head into the evening, and then finally I want a moonlight to come on. So you see, you have a little more flexibility, where with a metal halide, you didn't have that choice. You didn't get to pick it. You were just given, what you bought. And when you think about this, you went to look for a bulb, you bought it, you screwed it in, it's yours. There's no takebacks. You can't say, oh, I don't like this color. Can I return this? Nope. You bought the bulb. So that's why you were being so picky. And it's the same with T5s. When we buy T5 bulbs, there are certain color bulbs you'll want to put in a certain order from front to back to get the best look. And sometimes it's a little nerve-wracking because you're thinking, well, if I just get 2 blues and 2 whites, I'll be okay, right? And then somebody says, oh, you need a Fiji pink, and you need a deep purple, and you need a UV, and you need a this. And you're like, well, I only have 4 slots or 6 slots. And so you have to figure out what are the best bulbs. And you may have to play with it until you find what you really like looking at the most. Now, there are debates also, do you even need white light? Or is blue light sufficient? And I've read the arguments. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to debate it. I'm just going to tell you, I highly encourage some white light in your tank each day. And if you want some blue light, that's fine too. But to just put everything under blue light, it just grows so much slower. And I know many of you are like, oh, why is my tank not doing better? Why isn't it growing faster? I wish it would look more blah. And it's usually because there's just not enough light hitting the corals. So I'm going to encourage you to have a period of the day where you're closer to 10K. And I suggest you do it while you're at work, while you're not there to see it, so you don't have to hate your tank. My tank right now actually is really pretty, and this is in, I don't know if that's 10K. That might be 8K, okay? And I do that specifically because it looks right on camera for the live stream. In person, it's a little bit yellow. That's why I said it's probably 8K. And, it's actually nice. It kind of looks like the sun is shining in there. It's just not really bright. I actually think I need to change that from what it is, maybe a little bit more intensity to make it a little bit brighter, but still stay in that color spectrum just for the look of the show. But in general speaking, my tank tends to have more of a blue hue. It tends to be 11, 12K all day long. And then as we head into the evening, the late night hours, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, it is really blue, and I love it. Everything looks completely fake, and I really enjoy it. And I like that I have that flexibility where I can just change things on a dime. If I want to take out my Nikon and take pictures of my tank, I can just quickly change it to photo mode, or I can change it to all 100% and find just that perfect look of the tank to take a few pictures, and then immediately switch it back to the normal schedule. That is a huge perk that I have using LEDs. One more thing that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to lighting your tank is water clarity. And so that's a super important one to be considered as well. And let's say you bought really nice light fixtures, but your water is really murky. It's just dirty. Maybe you're a person that doesn't change water. You're part of that tribe that says, I'm never going to change water. I just add what's lacking. I use ICP testing. Well, then you need something to clarify the water. You can run carbon, that helps clear the water, and you can run UV, that also helps clear the water. And as you clear the water, more light will penetrate, and the corals will get more intensity than they do normally in murky water. So I say the word murky, but I just mean, it's not great, okay? It's not perfection water. So if you really aggressively clean your water to really polish it and make it crystal clear, you may need to dial your lights down slightly, 5% or so that way you are not cooking these corals with this so much better and such great clarity of water. Just something to think about. You just don't want to forget about that, because you're on a mission to do one thing, and so often we focus on one thing so hard we kind of cause problems with something else. So just keep that one in mind. You can always readjust your lights up after a little while. You may see that your clarity declines after a few days, because carbon only lasts a few days, and then after that the water isn't crystal clear like it was. And you can see this for yourself. This isn't even a debate. You can just watch your tank and look for yourself. The best thing you can do is look from the end and look the full length of the tank, and that way you can see the longer distance, whether the tank's 3 feet, 4 feet, or my tank is 7 feet. You can see how it looks long distance wise and see if your water is clear or not. All right, let me scroll up and see if any thoughts were shared that I need to include. Dennis says, I'm all about DIY lighting. If you do want to DIY your lights, you can. And I talk about Dwayne quite often. He's a good friend of mine. And he had bought just cheap black boxes from China, and he had like 8 of them over his tank. And every single year he would DIY them. He would literally open them up and desolder every single LED puck and put brand new ones in. And he ran all those lights at 100% every single day, and he just replaced them as they burned out. He then later switched to Radions, and now he's using Sky. So just something as an aside to consider. And I asked him, do you plan to run these lights at 100% and go in there and cut out LEDs and replace them? He goes, nope. I'm done doing that. Because he'd spend every winter working on all those light fixtures to get them all peak efficiency again. Let's see. Paul says, how much lighting is actually needed for keeping an anemone? Does it matter if the rockwork is high enough to give them access to all the light intensities, or can it attach itself even to the glass? Depends on the anemone you're talking about. For example, the lowly bubble tip anemone that is the most popular in this hobby, I think is the most popular. I see everyone owns one. Those don't need as much light, but like Reefs, they need a ton of light. And they may climb up the glass and try to face the sun, so to speak, because they just want to soak up all the light they can get their little tentacles on. So you do want to consider what kind of anemone you have. Now, a long tentacle anemone, those tend to be white. They may get a little bit of a tan look to them, or even switch over to brown as they get used to your water parameters. Those I don't think are nearly as light demanding as like a bubble tip, and definitely not even close to a Reefs. Now, carpet anemones, they're going to need some decent light, and they tend to be down at the bottom of the tank. You very rarely see a carpet anemone up high. And rock anemones, they just need normal reef lighting. And tube anemones, the ones that are skinny but have these huge, crazy long tentacles that can catch fish, those things are really, really pretty. I don't believe they rely so much on lighting as much as on food. So that one may not need as much. Now, that is a good point, though. You said, what if something is up high? Will that be enough light? So if you were to have all your corals on the top of your rock work, they would definitely be getting more light than if you have all the corals down lower with a few staggered on the rock work, scattered about. And in that situation, we want to make sure there's enough lighting down low at the base of the tank. Now, I would say typically the least amount of par you should find in your tank, in a reef tank, would be maybe 80 to 100 at the sand, maybe 120. But then as we work our way up the rock work, we should be seeing 240, we should be seeing 360, maybe 400. And then way up at the surface of the water, you measure, you could be seeing numbers around 800 par. But very few things are way up that high in the tank. I mean, things will grow toward it, but then everything underneath it's getting shaded. So you will have to consider, do you need to trim these corals back, even though it seems to be growing toward the light and doesn't seem to be suffering at all. But you will just see how the base is turning white, it's turning skeleton, because it's just not getting the light it used to, because there's this huge object on the top creating essentially a shadow, and so it doesn't get what it was getting initially. I do know that one guy years ago really surprised me because, I was thinking bubble tips need good lighting, and he was using a compact fluorescent light bulb that I'd recommended for refugium lighting, and he grew a bunch of rose bubble tips down in his little, I'm going to say a part of his sump, where he just stuck this little floodlight bulb over it, and they were doing really well. And he says, "I can't believe it, Mark. That bulb you recommended for growing macroalgae, I have so many happy anemones." I was like, "There's no way!" And he did. He had a bunch. Now that bulb was much closer to the water. It was probably 3 inches off the water. So it didn't have to go nearly as deep because it was only like 10 inches of water anyway. But with a tank that's normally like 26 inches tall, 28 inches tall, 30 inches tall, we need to be able to penetrate more. And I'm not even delving really in, guys, I can't relate to your tiny tanks. I haven't had one in so long. I had a 29-gallon for 7 years, okay? So I did put in some time, but I never had those 12-gallon all-in-ones. I never had the ones that have a lid that folds down that has a light built in that you can't even change to something else. I never went through that phase. That was never a thing for me. I went straight into, well, the 29 was pretty tall, gave me some swimming space. And then, of course, I went to a 55, and then the 280, and the 400. So it's always been bigger, 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 and not these smaller tanks. But I've seen lots of you are buying lots of little tanks that are like Waterbox, Planet Aquarium, and they tend to be rimless. And I did ask a question here on the YouTube channel in the community tab. I said, what is the water level down from the top rim of your glass? I'm very curious, because I make these peacemaker boxes that you hang on your tank to put a brand new fish in so it can acclimate to the system social acclimation, where they can look at each other for 3 days, and then hopefully after that you can pour them in the tank and there won't be any aggression. And I noticed a couple of my customers had the box in their tank, but the box was below the water line. And I do include a lid to put on top, but I don't think the lid will stay. I think the lid will just kind of, with flow, it'll just blow off. And so I grew concerned that I might need to change the way I'm building these to where the top of the box is closer to the water line. Above, it needs to be above the water line a little bit. So I asked some people, how far is theirs went down. Some people answered me with metric numbers, like millimeters. And others said, I'm a ½ an inch, I'm 1 inch. And others said I'm 2 inches below, which is kind of what I thought it would be. And so there are different heights that are involved in our different tanks. And that was actually an important thing for me to know, because as I continue to build things in the future, I want to make sure they fit the most tanks and work the way I've designed them to. Now, a side that I wanted to bring up during the stream, because I didn't just completely go off tangent, was that I noticed quite a few people in those comments were saying how much they hated cleaning the glass on a rimless tank because it always sloshes over no matter how careful they are. And that has been my complaint since the beginning. I hate rimless tanks. And I had one for 3,000 days, whatever that is. And when I took the anemone cube down, I was so glad to get a new one that has what I call Youre brace, what Planet Aquarium calls splash guard. And that solid piece of glass all the way around, when you're cleaning with your magnet, the water cannot splash over and run down the outside. You can't have a snail climb up the glass and then send a trail of water down the outside of your tank. And when you're using your cleaning magnet, you're not going to have issues. It's so much nicer to have that inner rim on a tank. And I know the look of rimless is so beautiful, brand new, but when you're using it, it's just not nearly as beautiful. And it doesn't stay beautiful. There's very few people that keep that little bit of glass along the top pristine and perfect. You oftentimes see a water line. You might even see a calcification line. You're scraping it off with a razor blade. You're trying to make it look like it did when you first got it. And it just seems to be an ongoing battle for the life of the tank. So I'm glad to see others are starting to see the light. That it's just not as great as you think. It really is nicer to have it. So I guess if you were to put one of those screened tops that has a polycarbonate rim, to keep your fish from jumping out, that might act as a splash guard to help keep the water from sloshing over. Maybe. I don't think it's as tight as it could keep all the water from going over, but it probably blocks a lot of it from sloshing out. But with these smaller tanks, you have the flexibility of different light fixtures, and we're back to, like I was saying, the Kessel light fixture would be a nice one. The AI lights are a small type of puck. The AI Prime was a popular little light for small nano tanks back in the day, and it's still around, and I believe it's still affordable too. So there's a lot of choices on the market for when it comes to lighting your tanks. Will says his lights are 18 inches off the tank. My metal halides were 16 inches off the tank, off the surface of the water. Let's talk about the duration of the lights. I didn't really talk about that much. I mentioned my lighting period, but I didn't really talk about the full day, and I do want to talk about that. A lot of the default schedules that you'll find in the various apps like Mobius seem to lean toward just giving you 12 hours of light a day. And I think people ramp it up an hour, and then they have 10 hours of light, and then they ramp it down again. And I feel like that's too long a day period. I think it's too long. So what I would suggest is that you shorten that period to something more like a bell curve. So you can bring it up. I did this with my Radeon over the anemone cube for a very long time. And what it is the light came on, and then it came on some more, and then it came on some more, and then there was a peak of the day for like 3 hours, and then it started to drop off, and then drop off, and then drop off. So it was that bell curve look. And that worked really, really well with the tank. And I think my duration with that tank was 1:30 to 9:30. So that's 8 hours from the point the light turns on to the point the light turns off. Now with the Reef, I have the first light turning on this tank, and it's barely on at 11:30 in the morning. And by 4 o'clock, the tank is nice and bright, and it's like that for about 3 hours. And then it starts to taper off again, and then it's dim all the way up to feeding time, which is almost 11 o'clock at night. I tend to feed my tank at 11. I don't know why, I just been doing it like that forever, and I can't seem to change my schedule. I'll tell you guys, I am so off the normal schedule of most people. So often I look at the clock, I'm like, it's 9:30 already? And I'm talking about evening. It's already 9:30? And, the tank's still bright. I can still look in there and enjoy it. But it is tapering off. It is not the intense period it was. So I've been recommending people have the intense part of your day, just a few hours. I call it high noon. Just like, right now we're in spring, right? And as we have the sun coming out, it's pretty, it's nice, or maybe it's rainy, whatever. But there's a part of the day where the sun gets to the apex above you, and it's usually pretty intense and it's very bright. And then as it keeps working its way across, it's less intense. And, the heat might still be with you for a while. I mean, right now, Texas is just a mess. It is, we're going to hit 100 here in a couple of days. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. I want to see if it's still true because they keep changing their minds on the weather. Yeah. Tomorrow, it's going to be 100. That's insane. This is May. I've been telling people we're supposed to have hailstorms right now, not heat waves. But anyway, when the sun is directly overhead, you get that full intensity of light. You're getting blasted. Well, the same principle when the lights are directly above your aquarium, our lights don't move. It would be so cool. And there's been a few people making apparatuses that will take your light fixture and literally have it inch its way across a gantry and then come all the way down. And I'd actually like to see that. I wouldn't mind having that on my tank. That would be awesome. But what I have over my tank are 3 lights, and they all come on at the same time. They all turn off at the same time. And like I said, I have a peak of the day where the lights are at the most intense. And that schedule is actually available through the Apex Fusion software. So if you're running the Sky fixture and you want to try out someone else's profile, you can type in their username and see their profile and stick it into your lights and see if you want to run it. And I've had quite a few people say they're using the Milo's Reef schedule. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know. That's kind of neat. And they like it. Which is even crazier. It's not just me. Some other people like the same schedule I have, and they like the lighting. I'm sure they tweaked it, but they did like the overall premise of what I ran. And my reef is doing well with it. It likes it. I have a couple of corals that aren't doing well, and I think it's because I have almost no iron in my system, and I was lacking a couple other trace elements. And so I've been putting in some that I have. I need to order some. I'm such a procrastinator. But I have to order some, which would then fix the couple that are unhappy. But all the rest are great. And the whole tank wall to wall is looking really good. I've got this one little guy here that's not happy at all, and I'm probably going to lose it. And that was called a home wrecker. And then I have a Walt Disney a little bit further down. It just doesn't have any of the colors it's supposed to have. And I think it's because I'm missing a couple of key ingredients, and iron is probably one of them. My iodine was down, my strontium was down, my iron was down, my zinc was down, my manganese was down. And these are all these things, but there was nothing bad. There was nothing too high. There was nothing red on the ICP test. So I was just lacking some of the minor stuff. Oops. So I'm trying to replenish those now, and we'll see what happens. But all the rest of the corals in the tank are really pretty to look at and growing and happy. And they are getting some of their energy from the lighting, and then they're getting some of the benefits from the food, from the fish waste. And then finally, they get the benefits from the flow. So those are the 3 key things that we do with a reef tank: lighting, flow, and food. Tyler says, I have the Kessel AP9X and an A500 over my 140-gallon Peninsula, each running at about half power, and they're so bright. I don't use a dimmer or ramping cycle, just on and off. And Dusk says, I'm personally biased toward Kessel and Radion, but as long as it gives the appropriate power, spectrum, and spread, the brand is irrelevant. And that's true. That's what I was saying. I've been talking about brands I'm familiar with or have been around, but there's a bunch that I just don't know anything about. I know that Cobalt came out with a light fixture a few years ago. There's one called Vivispar. I think Noop Psych makes one. There's some of these other names out there that I just don't keep track of at all, that have all these different, because I'm not looking for lights, so I'm not looking for lights. It's just one of those things. When you're intensely trying to find a product, you can find all the choices. Like when I was looking for a rowing machine, I have been tracking 10 different brands, trying to figure out which one I want to get. Nano Joe says, did you run any difficulties swapping out from halides to Sky? I did not, and I think it's because I measured the par. Oh, I did want to mention, so I talked about if you can get a par meter. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to buy one. It's too expensive. I do know BRS was renting them. I don't know if they still do it, but you could basically rent it for, I guess you make a deposit of some kind, or maybe just make a payment, and you get it and you return it. And if you don't return it, I guess you're buying it at full price. But so there's that. And then Tulio contacted me, again, the guy from Reef, and he was telling me about this app that has been circulated on social media called AI Reef Cam. And apparently it has some ability to measure par. Now, it's not going to be as accurate as a par meter, but you can actually use your cell phone and load that app, and it's only for Apple. But the AI Reef Cam has a way to get under there and kind of get some ideas of the par. Now, I don't think you're going to submerge your phone in water, even though it's essentially waterproof, to measure par down low. But you can definitely stick it at the surface level and see what it is, or maybe put it lower in the tank when you're doing a water change and the tank is half empty to kind of get an idea, a ballpark idea of what the par is under your lights, to kind of give yourself some baseline information. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's something more than just pure guesswork. So that's something that you might consider. Lynn says, I have a 100-gallon aquarium that's made of acrylic that I've had for almost 15 years. Will it last forever, or will it eventually leak? I think any tank has the ability to leak at some point. You've had it for 15 years. If you're happy with it, if it's still doing well, that's great. If you are really worried, if you're seeing anything that gives you reason to pause and reconsider, it might be a good time to start shopping for a new tank, just in case. It's nice to be aware of what's going on. One of the things I always recommend people do is clean their tank really well. Clean all the top, clean around the seams, and really study those vertical seams and study that bottom seam if you can see it, and see if it looks normal or if there's like white areas in there or lots of little cracks in there. These are all signs of stress. And at some point, a tank of any kind, acrylic or glass, can let go. And sometimes it lets go in the upper corner. Sometimes it lets go right across the middle of the front of the tank. It's unfortunate, and none of us like it. And many of us have lived through it. Not all of us, but many of us have. And, it's why we tend to buy mops and mop buckets, and some of us own shop vacs, because we've had to deal with some floods. It's also good to have a backup container on hand of some kind. This is a different topic for emergencies, to where you have some kind of vessels to move livestock into in case your tank leaks. If you already own that and you have it in your garage or in your shed, or stored in the patio, at least you've got something to put livestock in an emergency. Timothy says, I was horrified at the par levels of my tank, way too low compared to what I expected and needed. And he said, renting a par meter is worth its weight in gold. Alex says, can sunlight be used for a reef tank? Well, yes. It's not as easy as that in most homes, but there are people that have done things in the past, like solitubes, which is a skylight on the top of the roof, and then there's like a reflective tube coming all the way down, and they installed them directly over the reef tank to bring in this sunlight. But they found they had to put in supplemental lighting, because when is sunset? Depending where you live, and daylight savings time could be 6:30, and your tank would be dark all evening. So they added supplemental light to keep the tank lit in the evening for themselves while they're eating dinner, watching movies, and spending time with family. So you had the benefit of free light from the sky. But then my friend Carl in California, he had this monster tank. I think it was 500 gallons. And he made this huge light chimney that went straight up 2 stories of this reflective material, and had this monster amount of light. And he lived in San Diego or Los Angeles. And he was surprised at how frequently cloud cover came in and made his tank look dark. And, he was really counting on, I'm going to get hit with sunlight every day. It's going to be fantastic. And he ended up with a lot of days where he didn't have nearly as much light as he was hoping, shooting down this light corridor. But he did run it for a long time. And eventually I think he broke it all down. But I remember for a period there, he was really struggling with algae problems. And it was just, it never seemed to stop. And he was really, really fighting it. So sunlight may lead to some algae issues. Now, obviously, having a healthy cleanup crew in your tank and staying on top of water parameters will help immensely with algae control. But sunlight does add an extra element compared to our fake lighting. Our fake lighting doesn't quite, it seems to be less likely, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, because I do see people posting tanks full of algae and they have whatever lights they're using. So again, water parameter control and cleanup crew are critical to keeping algae under control no matter what light you're using. Anemone Lover says, can you grow rotary anemones, sea bay, long tentacled anemones under Radeon XR30 blues? Yeah, I think so. I'm actually more a fan of the Pro light than the blue light. I'm talking about the Radeon Pro versus the Radeon Blue, because it does let you lean into more of the white spectrum and not just blue all the time. The blue intensity, the blue lighting just has a different amount of par. And there's a whole, like I said earlier in this discussion, there's a lot of debate about the nanometers and how much light your stuff gets in the ocean, and they compare it to that. But I have been diving. Now, I've been diving everywhere, and there's a lot of places I still want to dive. But most of the places I dive, it's not blue light. People say it's blue. The water's blue. Everything's blue. You should see it in the ocean. I'm like, no, I've been diving. It was beautiful. It was daylight. The sun was out, and it did not look like a blue hue at 80 feet. It's definitely different, and yes, it will taper off, and I wish I could just take a par meter down with me, or even a nanometer down with me and kind of get the real numbers, but the sun is shining, 83 million miles to hit Earth, and then you think it just suddenly dies off within 6 feet of penetrating the water on the ocean? No, it still is penetrating down. Now, we're not talking about going 300 feet down. We're talking about recreational diving where most corals are found. And those corals tend to be found in 30 to 60 feet. And those corals are not just basking in blue light all day long, no matter what you're being told. That's just not true. So if I ever find out that I'm wrong about this when I go diving, I will be the first to come on this channel and let you know I was wrong. But I've dove Fiji, Hawaii, Bonaire. I did a little snorkeling in Tahiti and in Cancun. I've been to the Florida waters, where the water's 30, 40 feet deep in most areas, and where I went. In those areas, it doesn't look like our blue tanks. It looks more white. So anyway, I didn't really answer your question. Can you grow all these these anemones under there? Yes, you can. Will you be able to propagate them like crazy, make more of them? That comes down to husbandry, but the light definitely will work in your favor. It's not a bad light at all. Mr. Benj from the UK is here to actually be here live while I'm live. And I'm really glad that I've been able to help you with a hobby. Varshil says, do you still use the Gen 4 Pros for your Anemone Cube temporary tank? Right now, I've got a Kessel over the Anemone tank. It's the A360X with a little cone to like direct it straight down so it's not just shining out this way. And I have the Radeon Gen 4 with the Reef Bright still dangling from the ceiling where the old tank was. I think I just want to clean that one, but my leaning toward, do I want to get the Radion 6? Do I want to get another Sky? I mean, I am playing with a thought, but I own this light and it works, so I might just keep going. And yes, Paul, it's really important to ask those kind of questions. He says, I'm asking about the anemone so I know what to provide before I just throw it into my tank. I think an hour of research is worth its weight in gold compared to just doing something without research. Oh, I completely agree. I think that when we buy things, we should know before we buy what it needs, what it's, how to care for it properly, and what to watch out for and what to look for in case it starts to decline. So yeah, you're on the right track. Matt says you're too old for the all-in-ones. I am playing with the thought of adding another tank at some point when everything is done around me. When I get the Anemone Cube back up and I've got my business worked out into the new building, and I'm operating there, and I have a more decluttered home. I love the idea of setting up something different, and I'm kind of dreaming of different ideas that I think might be kind of nice. I'm just going to throw these comments up here because I feel like they bear merit. Alfie's Reef says, I have 2 rimless and I'll never do it again. And Dusk194 says, I adore my rimless 70 gallon. I ran it as a freshwater first and then as my first reef, but I am definitely getting a perimeter brace on my next one. Reef Under the Roof says, do you still use older XHOs together with the Sky LEDs? No, I have the Reef Brights that I bought so many years ago. They've been over my reef, I don't know, 6, 8 years. I don't even know how old they are. Whenever I did the video on them, that's how long I've had them. Well, I had them longer than that. I had them for 6 months before I installed them. But they come on and they turn off. I just own them. And a lot of times when I just want some quick light, like for example, it's 11 o'clock at night, the skies are almost completely dark because of the lunar cycle. It's like new moon is dark earlier than full moon, which is bright much later. So there are times where my tank goes dark before 11 o'clock. Remember I told you earlier, like, oh my God, is it 9:30 already? Suddenly it's 11 and I'm looking, I haven't fed the fish yet. So I hit a button that I have. There's a physical button on the side of my tank, and that turns on the XHO for 10 minutes. And that brightens up the tank, and all the fish get all excited because they then tell each other, he didn't forget. He is going to melt the food. We're about to get food. We should swim around actively and get him motivated. And then I melt the food really quick, and I add that to the tank. And 10 minutes later, those XHOs turn off. So it's really handy for some quick blue light in a hurry. But I could always just open up the app on my phone and then go into my profiles and actually pick one of my Sky profiles, because I have 5. And I could just select one that I like. The only thing I don't like about the Sky scheduling is modifying my physical, permanent, everyday schedule. I don't like messing with that one. I went to a lot of trouble to get it just the way it is. And then there's times where like, man, I wish the tank was brighter right now. But if I go into that schedule and move a slider up, it then stays like that. And I have this weird peak until I fix it. And I don't want to change that. So that's why I have these profiles. I have one that's 100% all 4 channels. I have one that is just crazy blue. I think I called it something funny like, I just call it Make It Glow. That's my crazy blue phase. And then I have evening mode that I got from Dwayne. That's what he uses every evening, and I liked it. And then there's photos time, which like I used yesterday. I just switched it to photos time, and then I started taking pictures, and it worked out really well. Ruben says, I think the Mobius app runs the Gen 5 too long. I try to do about 10 hours with Moonlights, but theirs is set to about 12 hours with AB+. Yeah, like I said, I think the default is like these super long days, but I just don't think days are literally that long normally in nature. I think it's shorter because the sun is coming up and moving its way across, and then when it gets to about here, you got some good light happening on the reef, and then it's here, it's definitely tons of light, and still good light, and then it starts to dwindle down. And I think we run our lights where it's like all on and stay on for this long, and it's just too long. So I just recommend a shorter period of peak, that high noon, wherever you want the high noon to be. It doesn't have to be noon. It could be 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. But just, I think that part where you're really cranking the par should be a decent burst, but not too long. Jake says, do you use the Moonlights on the skies? And if so, how do you use them? Do you follow the moon phases? You know, I had some kind of program. Because remember, I was beta testing this light before it came to market. And I had some kind of setting, and I was very adamant to not lose that setting. And so I would copy it and save it in Notepad. And then I would drag it back in if I had to make an update, because it was the only way you could not lose what you did because you were beta testing. And then recently, like in the last 4 weeks, I stumbled across some thread in the Neptune website, and because they have a forum just for everything, all things Neptune. And someone was talking about the moonlighting schedule. I was like, huh, you know, I still have like my ancient code in there. Maybe I'll switch it. And so I went ahead and I switched it to whatever. And I think it is following the lunar cycle. And the Radions have the same thing. They have a lunar cycle. And I'm telling you, the Radions, I really like their fixtures. They're nice. And, you know, I've had them on my other two tanks, my other two satellite tanks. And the funny thing is, like, I would walk into the living room and I wouldn't know what time it is because I'm not staring at the clock. I'm not watching my watch. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not paying track to what's on TV. I'm cooking or whatever I'm doing. And I'm looking at the tank and it's like glowing. It's so bright. And I'm thinking, I thought it was later. And, you know, my tank's so bright, I'm thinking it must be 8 o'clock. I look up at the clock. It's like midnight. I'm like, why is my tank so bright? And it's the Radeon. Just and so I go outside and there's a huge full moon right over my head. I'm like, oh, okay, it's copying the full moon. Makes sense. And then there's other nights where, you know, I need to feed the fish. And I was feeding the fish at 10:30, not at 11. And so here I am with the food. It's thawed. It's 10:30. And I walk over and the tank's almost pitch dark. I'm like, why is the tank light off already? What on earth is going on? New moon. The lights actually turned off earlier than 10:30. So again, the magic button for the reef brights where it turns them on for 10 minutes was a very nice workaround for those lunar phases that were catching me off guard. JW says, did you introduce the skunk clowns all at the same time? I have a mated pair of orange skunks and would like to add a few more. Yeah, I did a video about it. I think I added them 7 years ago, and I put them down an acrylic tube into the anemone, and that's all 11 still to this day. They're all there. And they were all purchased within the same 24-hour period. Initially, I bought a few, and then I got more that same day and put them through safety stop, and then they went down the tube. And they've been with me ever since. Now, can you add more? You should be able to. Those are harem clownfish, so they should accept more, but no guarantees. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but it should be an odd number. So if you're, you didn't say what size your tank was, but if you can get yourself 7, 9, 11, 13 of them, that may work out, even though you currently have a pair. Gary says, I just ordered a water box 220.6 with 4 Radeon XR 15 Pro. What schedule would you recommend setting it up when it arrives? I think it may still exist, but I'm not 100% positive. There was a schedule that was called Radiant, and that was the one that I called the bell curve one, and that's what I followed for years. And that all that information is on my website. If you can go to milasreef.com and then look in the look in the search, that would probably be easiest, and do Radeon schedule, or type into Google Radeon schedule Milev. It'll probably take you right to the article. And I show all the sliders, and it's all dated because it was all back then. Things look differently now because so much has been updated over the years. But I really like the Radeon schedule, and like I said, I started mine, the Radiant schedule for the Radions. I think my tank started around 1 or 2 in the afternoon and went to like 10, 11 o'clock at night because that worked better for me. I don't get up first thing in the morning like a lot of people. I'm getting up earlier, but I'm not getting up that early to where I'd need lights on my tank. And even then, even if I got up at 7 a.m., I have no desire to be looking at my aquarium at 9 a.m. I am all about the afternoon and evenings. That is when I think a reef tank should be looked at. And when people ask if they can come over and visit, I always say 4 o'clock is the best time to show up. So, obviously 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that period works out well. But if they come too early, since my lights haven't started yet, the corals aren't opened up yet. So it's not a really good looking tank that early in the morning. So there's no point. Someone asked me a question. Let me do a quick search. While you're all waiting, I apologize. Oh. So the question was from Anton. Apparently, you can propagate Homophilia australis by cutting off the bottom of their skeletons. What do you think about this? I typed in what that coral is, and that's the scoli, or scolemia, and I've not heard that, and I don't know anything about that. I just know scolies are already hard enough to keep alive. I don't know anything about propagating them or modifying them, so I don't have an opinion other than I probably wouldn't do it myself because it's so darn expensive. But I definitely would enjoy having a few in my tank if I didn't have fish that would eat them. Alfie says they do make lenses for diving cameras for diving in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea to filter out some of the blue. And you're right. And I have used those filters when I was diving in Fiji, when I was diving in Florida. And it's something, I mean, think about it. Right now, if I use my iPhone, and I told you this tank is kind of yellow, but if I take a picture now, it will look like there's more blue because of the way this camera is. So while looking through the ocean may not appear that blue to your human eye, your camera is going to throw in more, which makes it look off. And that's why we put it into some kind of photo editing software or video editing software to suck out some of the blue to make it look good again. And so having filters on the front of our lenses does help a lot to create the right look. And at this point, all the lenses for my Nikon camera have a orange filter for whatever period I'm doing. I'm almost never shooting without that orange filter on my camera, even though my lighting is much cleaner to the eye and doesn't look like crazy blue. Jamie says, what are the things you're looking for most when buying a light? And what do you like? And also, what have you seen so far from the Radeon Gen 6s? Well, I haven't seen anything. I mean, what little bit I've seen, I can't talk about until midnight tomorrow night, I guess. But I do know that the 6 is slightly different from the 5. And I believe, well, what can I say? I'm trying to think what was in the Reef Builders article. Backwards compatibility is possible, and upgrade kits are possible for Gen 5 owners. Stuff like that's happening. Hopefully I'm not going to get them mad at me for just barely talking about this. But there are some features that are, some people are going to say, I definitely like that idea. So there's that. When it comes to me looking at a light fixture, like I said, so often I don't look. I guess for me, it's the way it looks. I care very much about the fixture itself. And so like when the Kessel A360Xs came out, they were like this perforated hockey puck. I was like, man, I love those, because the Radions were these big rectangles, and then the smaller, the XR15s were, you know, there were squares, and they're about this tall, and you know, they look okay. But the trick is how to hang them so they look straight. If you're using a hanging kit, they always tilt or they hang at an angle, and you're always trying to adjust them to get that perfection, you know, that satisfies your OCD opinion of how the light should look. And so they made the RMS the rack mounting system to where you put it into a clip and you lock it in, and now they're hanging exactly. But then you look at the frame, and the frame is kind of, it's not straight. It kind of bows down a little bit. And then you have the power cord hanging off the light, and that kind of tugs the light down slightly. And all those little things, they are part of the decision-making process for me. So I do care of what the light looks like. I care about how the tank looks like under the light. And price, of course, matters to me as well. But you know, we've seen a lot of changes over the years from what originally came to the market, 10, 15 years ago. So different now, what we have now compared to what we had then. So I guess I would also care very much is the software to control the light if you're going to do it on your phone. So I remember when we were at the trade shows at MACNA, at Reefapalooza, these vendors would set up their booths and they have an iPad there, and they would show you how you can change the lighting by moving this one slider and just add more blue and turn the white off and then increase the intensity of the whole thing or bring it all the way down to dim. And they show you the ease of use. And for me, that's really important. I really want to be able to plug something in, find my Wi-Fi network, and just use it and not mess with it. I do not have the desire to get into that app day after day after day. And for those that say the app is always down, like, how often are you in this app? Why are you in this app all the time? I haven't even opened the app in months. I probably have to do another app update just to get the latest version because I haven't used it. Either it works or it doesn't. But some people, I think they love to tinker. They want to be in it all the time. I don't understand that desire. That's just different for me. And I've talked with a few others, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm the same way." I'm like, "Oh, okay, good. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me." Varshal says, "Do you think one AI prime would be enough to light a 2 by 1.5 by 1.5 BTA only tank? Is it 2 feet wide by 1.5, or is it 1.5, 1.5, 2 feet tall? Because that does kind of change things. You may find the way the prime hangs with its bracket that it's not really centering completely to where you're satisfied. That's something you have to choose. And even where you put the light over the tank matters. For example, a lot of lights, if you think about it, you would think I want it dead center. I want it, if the tank is front to back, 24 inches, I want it on the 12-inch line. That is my epicenter. I want the light right there. But actually, I like the light a little bit closer to me and then tilted down because the back has the overflow box. I don't need to light the overflow. So if I'm going to have something in the corner stealing real estate, there's going to be no corals, there's no reason to put light there. And to tilt it slightly so I don't get the blue light in my eyes or even the white light, I'm not looking into the light. Now, when the new stand goes up with a new tank, it's going to have a new canopy to literally hide the Radeon and the reef brights, and it'll just be 3 sides of wood, and then I can just reach over the top to put food in. And if I need to work on the tank, I'll just slide it off and put it on the ground and work on the tank. And then when I'm done, put it back on. So that way, when I'm taking pictures and I'm holding my camera in front of me, whether it's a phone or an icon, and I'm taking pictures, I don't have the light fixture shining down on the lens of my camera or on the lens of the phone. This will be wood. Here's my body of water. Here's my stand down here. It will be looking at this without the blast of light shining into the lens. And there are times where I'm taking pictures and I'm actually doing this with my hand. I'm like trying to block the light from hitting the front. You can actually see the shadow covering the lenses as I'm doing this now. As I move my hand up and I lower it, you can see the shadow. I'm doing the same thing with my tank sometimes. When I'm in the back, filming the back of my reef, I'm trying to do this so that the blue light isn't just hitting. So having that woodwork around there does help a little bit to keep that from messing up your photographs. And it definitely doesn't cast. When we were talking about painting that wall over there, we picked out a nice blue. Caitlin said, I want all the walls to be gray. And I said, well, I do want an accent wall. She says, okay. I said, do I get to pick that color? And she said, all right. So I said, okay, I want that to be deep blue. It's been red forever. Let's make it deep blue. And she said, all right. So we went and bought deep blue and, whatever it was called. And then we painted a patch of the color on the wall, but the lighting coming off the anemone cube made it glow. She said, I feel like I'm inside Burger King. It's terrible. It's awful. And I was like, yeah, I agree. It's too blue. It looks wrong. So we discovered that at midnight or 1 in the morning, that blue was beautiful. But when the aquarium light was on, which is every single day, it didn't look good at all. And so the decision was made, forget the blue, it's not going to happen. But I did tell her at the time, I said, if we wrap that tank to where the light is trapped within the woodwork and only going down the tank, that wall will not be affected anymore. And she agreed completely. So keep that in mind. If your lights are exposed and wide open, your rimless tank and your dangling light, and the light's going all over the room, it's going to affect how things look. If you can trap it inside there, you may discover your tank is much more appealing to the eye because you're not being blinded by light into your eyes. It's one of those things you have to decide what you like the look of. Ferdy says, on the peak time, how much intensity and whites do you run in your sky? It'd be easier for me to just open this up and look on here. It wants me to log in. Hang on, let me just do it on my phone. So My peak is 60%, and my color is custom, and it looks like, yeah, I'm looking at it correctly. It's 60% amber, 80% violet, 80% royal blue, and 60% white. That is my peak. Justin says, I have a Kessel H180 on my Emerald 34 sump, and I'm having issues growing chaetomorpha. It turns white and dies out. The phosphates are 0.39, nitrates are 10, phosphates 8.1, magnesium 1330, salinity is 1.025, calcium 458. Yeah, all your numbers sound good. Chaetomorpha should grow. You might need iron. You didn't mention that, and that's one of those things that there is an iron test kit, like Saliford makes it, but maybe an ICP test might be simpler, just to send it off and let them give you all the numbers. But chaetomorpha definitely needs iron to grow, and you shouldn't run the light 24 hours a day. So if you are running it all the time, your area can turn white. And if you're not tumbling the chaetomorpha, if you're not like making it move, here's your ball of algae and here's your light right above it, however the distance is. And the light might be here, the light might be here, the light might be here. I mean, I don't know where you got it, but it's just sitting there and it's hitting the top and turning it white, like you said. If it was turning, it would be evenly lit all over. So it's tumbling and everything's green all the time. But even then, I don't think 24 hours a day of light is good. And you didn't say you're doing that. I'm going to guess you are. But if you could change that light cycle from 7 to 9 hours, whether it's the middle of the night while your reef is at rest or it's during the daytime when you're looking in the sump, you might find that that will work out better for you. The light you have also probably has the ability to turn down the intensity. You could try turning it down a little bit just to see if that makes a difference. But those are my thoughts. Too much light, too close to the plant's not turning. I mean, even physically taking the plant and just turning it a quarter turn or flipping it over every day might be worth looking into to see if that'll make a difference. But you may be lacking iron. And Brightwell sells something called Chaeto Grow, which I think is iron. Brian says, I'm off topic, but my Red Sea reefer has been dry and empty for a little over a year. Are the seams still good? Probably. You can do the fingernail test where you press into the silicone and just kind of see if it's spongy or if it's turned hard as stone. That's kind of one way to test silicone, but that's as much as, I mean, that's all you can do. I mean, there's not really much more. Everything else is just visual inspection and then maybe a water test. And hopefully it'll be okay. Nope, these are the same clowns all these years later. Same anemone, too. Oh, if you have a 500, you're set. Kyle's here. Hey, Kyle. He says that the orange filter from Hoya works great on the cameras. Yeah, like I said, I bought it for all my lenses. Dusk says the Gen 6 is the same general software and hardware. There are new lenses and different LED sets, and I think there's a different amount of LEDs or choices of color of LEDs, maybe. Again, I'm trying not to break the rules here. Ray, thank you very much for the super chat. He said, I love all the pertinent information you give us each week. It's so informative. I appreciate that you say that. And Alfie's Reef says, thank you for the super chat. Says, thanks for the stream as always. Thank you. Born to be a Shooter says, I'm late. I didn't get my notification. What do you think of the SB Reef lights? They've been around for a while, and a lot of people are buying them, and I didn't hear bad things about them. I think even when there was a problem, like something broke or they needed parts, I think they always took care of their customers. So I would say that's probably a solid choice still to be. But I feel like the owner of the company moved away from what he was doing originally. I think he was doing more about conservation and reef conservation and ecology. And I think he was delving more into that more than just selling aquarium lights and corals. So I don't know the latest. I haven't actually talked to that owner in years. But I remember when his brand was out and a lot of people were buying it. Rasmus says, what's the best way to keep my 145-gallon mixed reef, which is SPS and 4 tangs, alive after we return from 5 weeks vacation? Well, I'm more worried about what's going to happen during the 5 weeks you're gone. I think once you're back, you can definitely keep it alive. It's who's going to keep it alive while you're gone is my concern. So are you doing a tank sitter? Are you going to use webcams and automation? What's your plan? But once you're back, you may need to do a water change. You'll probably need to do some deep cleaning. You want to inspect everything carefully. 5 weeks away from an SPS reef is a long time. Good luck. Oh, he says no SPS. Lewis says, how do you get your tank so good? Well, I have a series on here called Reef Diary. You should probably check it out. It's 139 episodes long. Each episode they average about 5 minutes long. And it just shows the day-to-day of what I do with my tank. Now, I did take a break for a few months. I think I stopped like the end of November. And then I just recently resumed it again to show what I do. But basically, I keep my hands out of the tank. I rely on automation. I count on it to do everything it needs to do. I make sure all my equipment is in good shape. If something's breaking, I replace it immediately. I get a little bit of luck thrown in. That's an important one. I try to prepare for emergencies always. I'm always trying to anticipate. Matter of fact, I ordered some more stuff for my tank. That's all for the electrical department. And 2 components are here, but the third one isn't here yet. So that was supposed to arrive yesterday, and I got a notification saying it's arriving on Monday. So when I have all 3 pieces, or even after they're installed, I will do some kind of a video update to show you that, because that will be part of my emergency power backup system that works in conjunction with the generator. So I'm just kind of making things better than what it's been up till now. But I feed the tank once a day, and I make sure top off is automated. Like I said, automation is really important. So my tank is being topped off all the time, through an automatic top-off system. I know a lot of people don't do that. They don't set up something that just tops off the tank automatically, no matter what size the tank is. And I feel like that is like the first thing you should get hooked up on your tank, is to replace the water that evaporates. So I think that's pretty much it. That's my answers. Dusk says he really enjoyed the Reef Diary series and binged the first 70. Wow. That's like me with TV, and we're back to television again. I like to binge a series. I don't want to watch. I'm sick of the wait a week for the next episode, wait a week for the next episode. I hate it. So I'll just totally avoid something and let it build up 2-3 seasons, and then I just watch it all and just really watch the story unfold. I like that. And I think going through the the Reef Diary that way might be more enjoyable, possibly. I don't know. I've never tried to watch them back to back like that, but we did talk about a lot of things during that first 130 episodes. Okay. Is there any more questions? Because other than that, I think we're going to kind of wrap up. I do want to give you a quick update on the building. That was also my list of things to talk about today, because we talked about everything else. The building is completely painted. I'm done painting. I'm not painting another drop. I don't want to. And I feel like I spent a week painting, because I had to do primer coats, and I had to do the final coats, and I rolled everything, and then I used a sprayer. I'm done. And so I cleaned the floors, and they look great again. And now I've started to work on the electrical. Oh, my fingertips hurt from wire nuts and stripping wires and doing all that. And I've gotten a few of the outlets done. I've got more to go. But I'm also, like I said, the weather is horribly hot, and there's no electricity in that building. So I'm trying to go in there like early in the morning before the heat of the day happens. So today I got up, I started a pot of coffee, and I went outside, and I did 4 sets of outlets. And then I was like, that's it. I gotta get ready for the live stream. They don't go quickly, because you want them to be perfect. I feel like I've turned my building into my new hobby, which is terrible. But I posted a picture of let me grab that. I posted this on People Lost Their Minds. I did it on purpose, actually. So let me find it really fast, and maybe some of you guys saw it. I gotta steal it off my Facebook page. Okay. Save. Okay, so I posted this picture. And it's had like 73 comments. Everyone's just like, why isn't it straight? Why are those screws not all face the same direction? Is that a GFI? Is that 20 amps? Is it this? Is it that? So many questions. It's great. I actually totally did that on purpose. I just took a single picture, made no description whatsoever, and just posted it. So in the meantime, at the time when I put that in there, I had the screws just tight, and I took my picture, and then I made them all standing straight up and down. But some people are like, the outlet should be the other way around. And yeah, lots of opinions. It was hilarious. So I'm working on those. And getting them to be the exact same height side by side and sticking out equally and not have one leaning out and one leaning in. Oh. And believe it or not, one of the things I'm doing, like usual, I'm using plumbing parts for electrical. The long screws that hold it into the blue electrical boxes, I'm actually trimming little bits of RO tubing to put as a spacer behind the outlet itself, so that way the outlet sits flush with the sheetrock and doesn't get sucked all the way down to the box, because for some reason all my boxes seem to be recessed a little bit too far for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they are. So I am using these little spacers, and I'm just cutting RO tubing, you know, like 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch wide, and putting them on every single screw to get everything to look right. And then I put it together, and I don't like, and I take the cover off again, and I adjust it 1/4 inch, and I do this, and I try and force the wire into the box to kind of make it straighten out this. Oh, it's such a beating. And you know, most people would say, who cares? But I care. I'm going to be in there working, and I want it to look just right. So I'm doing that. Justin says, for 150-gallon mixed reef, the Kessel or the Radeon? Well, I would look at the latest brand new Kessel, whatever model that is, and see what you think of that one. And then I would look at the latest brand new Radion and see what you think of that one. Both of them are brand new to market in the last 2 months. I mean, one's coming out next week. One came out like 3 weeks ago. So there's something really worth considering. But the Radion should definitely treat you well. And they do a really nice job of covering that 2 foot by 2 foot area. I'm sure the Kessel can do the same thing. I don't follow the math as much with Kessel. I just kind of look at the fixture. I like the look of their fixtures. And but I also do like the ability to make adjustments from the phone. So you have to decide which software do you like to work with more, the Kessel software or the Mobius software for the Radeon. And I remembered when I was when I got to preview test the AP 700 from Kessel, the software wasn't available yet. But a customer of mine had bought 2 of those lights, and when I was visiting him and checking out his reef, because he wasn't too far away, he was showing me the software. I was like, man, that was really nice. I wish I could have played with that, because that actually looked really useful. So I do believe the Kessel software is really nice as well. I just never got to play with it myself. Alex, thank you so much for the super chat. I really do appreciate that. Justin says, for AI primes, is there a light channel I can avoid to reduce algae growth on the glass surfaces? You know, I don't really think there's a certain spectrum shining on a reef tank that encourages more algae than the other. I don't believe that if your tank is just all blue light, that you won't have algae on the glass. And I don't think that a tank that's being lit with white light will just put algae. I mean, I get algae on my glass every single day. Every single day. And every day I'm erasing it with my cleaning magnet. And I have to do this side, I have to do that end, and I got to do the back. By the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, I've got my little fishy back there on the new, the Flipper Max Edge, I think that's what it was called. And I put it on that way so you could see the fish, the nice piece of art. And I was looking at it a couple days ago, and the cleaner wrasse, I swear he looked like he was cleaning the boxfish. He worked on it, and then he was like, all right, let me work on Spock instead. But I thought, man, that's hilarious. But by the time I had a chance to even grab my phone, it was already moved on. But I did enjoy watching it, trying to clean the cleaning magnet. One thing, Justin, that helps with reducing algae growth on the film algae that grows on the glass is going to be controlling your phosphates to make sure they don't get too high. And using something like Reef or even dosing phytoplankton can help reduce algae growth on the glass. But it is just something that happens all the time. Reef with Me says, I have the same schedule for almost 2 years, 1 hour to ramp up, levels off to a blue spectrum for 10 hours, and then an hour to ramp down. What are the benefits of incorporating a real schedule? You have a real schedule. If you're happy with that schedule, you've had it for a couple of years and everything's doing well in your tank, keep going. But if you want to kind of add some of the white spectrum in there for a little while, that might be beneficial. I know you've been running into some new things like silicates and dinoflagellates, and you're kind of dealing with some things. So lighting right now you probably don't want to be messing with that on top of everything else. But I probably would shorten your lighting period a little bit. I think it's a little bit long. Sean, I think the best, safest answer I can give you is to give you the difference between the Gen 5 Pro and the Gen 6 Pro is to wait until Monday, when the official news is out. You can go to the Ecotech Marine website, and you can probably see a side-by-side comparison article on their website, or just read all about the Gen 6, because that is going to be the most solid information you can possibly get, and it's just 2 days from now. Justin says, what do you think about smart power strips? They are missing some functions in comparison to the Apex. I have a few Casa strips, and they're great. You can monitor power consumption too. Hey, that's pretty cool. The smart strips become more and more practical in being able to turn things on and off, and that is useful. But they, like you said, they can't replace a controller. My controller literally turns the heaters on and off based on the temperature of the water in my aquarium. It will actually turn the lights off of my aquarium if the tank gets too hot, just to stop any source of additional heat. And for me, that's a visual. Hey, the tank went dark. My tank must be too hot. And I run over there to figure out what's going on. Now, that has almost never happened, but it was coded that way on purpose to give me a good way of finding out what's happening. And there was a time where I was just watching TV, and suddenly my lights turned off, and my tank had crept up over 81.5. And I was able to turn on some cooling fans and make sure my AC was working. It was just one of those things. But smart strips can be practical for other uses. And, the ability to control things from your phone would be really nice. Like, for example, with a smart strip, if you have a light plugged into it, and if the light has a timer built into it, then it doesn't matter what it's plugged into. It can be plugged into the wall. But having the ability to click a light on to stay longer, I guess it depends. If the light has a timer built in, all you're doing is turning the power on and off. Then I was just thinking, like, you're driving home, you're coming home with a brand new fish you just bought that day, but you went to dinner, and by the time you get home, the house is going to be dark and the tank's going to be dark. But if you had the ability to make your lights down an extra 30 minutes or an hour, it might be nice. I can do that with Fusion. I can tell it, hey, don't turn off my lights yet. Where the smart strip would turn on a light of some kind if there wasn't a timer involved. But if there was a timer involved and the timer says, hey, it's midnight, your lights should be off, it doesn't matter how much you trigger that switch, I don't think your lights are going to come on. So that's going to be one of those things where you have to figure out what's best for you in most practicality. But you could use smart strips for things like water changes. So here you are, you've got your pump, you've got your tubing in your hand, and you grab your phone and you turn on the pump to pump the water out. Turn on the pump to pump water back in. That's a nice ability. I've always had the power strip with the 6 outlets and the light switch, the toggle switch, and I put it on the floor and I throw a towel over it so I can only see the switch. And then I would sit there with my toe and I would hit that button while I got a hand here and I'm holding the hose there, and I do my water change. And then when it was done and sucking in air, I could hit the button with my toe but it's not as safe. So if you have the ability to, Alexa, turn this pump on, or you have an app on your phone or something to trigger things on, that can be really useful there. Some people like to use smart strips also like to turn their skimmers on and off, for example, on demand. Like their skimmer's going crazy, they can see it from across the room, like, hey, Alexa, turn off my skimmer. Elmer says, with all the cleaning of the glass, don't you have many scratches right now? The only scratches I have in my tank were from devices that I shouldn't have used. So I use, where is it? I use the algae-free Tiger Shark float. The outside is wood. The inside is plastic. This is felt on this side, and that's Velcro on that part that's inside the tank. And that doesn't scratch my glass at all. The sand I use in my tank is about 3 millimeter or smaller. It's called Reef Flakes. So it's not dust. It's actually sand. It's bigger flakes of sand. And I don't let it get trapped between the magnet, and I can just clean my glass. But like when I used a razor blade, and I'm chiseling away at something like a coral that grew on the glass, I put some scratches. When I was beta testing a certain pump that was on the market, coming to market, that darn thing scratched my glass, made me really mad. When I tried a magnet with a metal scraper to do cleaning, it scratched my glass because my glass is so soft. So there's about 7 or 8 real scratches on my tank. My tank's 8.5 years old. But for the most part, I use the Velcro scrubby. I might use the magic eraser if possible. And if I have to do deep cleaning, I really like to use a credit card or a hotel key card or a gift card to scrape the glass. And it's way more tedious, but do I have it handy? Yeah. So Flipper came out with this a couple of years ago, and it's a thing that you can put in gift card, hotel key cards, credit cards, and you can push them in like this, and then you can use it to scrape and it won't scratch the glass. And you can also put it in this way, like to get in those spots where it's even more narrow. And they have a longer handle too. So there's 2 different sizes of this thing. I sell the longer handled one on my website, I believe. Maybe this is the one I sell. I don't know. But I do use that one on the frag tank, and I have used it in this tank, and it's very practical. There's also a tool that came out that was a 7-in-1 or 6-in-1 tool from, who was that? Marineland? And I was using it, had a metal blade. And the new thing I'm pointing at right there, that Super Max from Flipper, there are metal blades and there's plastic ones. I put the plastic ones on there because my tank scratches so easily. And I find that as long as I use plastic, my glass does not get scratched. So it's when I start using metal when things go wrong. Born to be a Shooter says, how long do you think I should give a Goniopora to recover after being moved to a new tank before I begin to worry and start doing things to try and save it or give it back to the guy to recover? Yeah, I haven't had much luck with Gonies, so I'm just going to pass on answering your question. Maybe someone in the chat knows the answer, but I don't have success with that one particular coral. Keep an eye on the coral itself. Make sure sand isn't getting on it. Make sure none of your fish are nipping at it, because that's a big problem. But if it's just there, it should begin to open up and be a happy little thing at some point if everything else is going well. He said he offered to take it back if it's not better in 3 weeks. It's been out 3 or 4 days. It's not opening up, just like a 1/4 of an inch. I've ordered Reef Plus and Benereef, hoping these will save it. Foods can help. There's actually a food called Goniopower that is a Goniopora food. I sell it on my website too if you want to try that. The Benereef food should also be a good broadcast feeder. But like I said, you just need to see, is it the flow? Is it there a neighbor stinging it, that's sending out sweepers? Or is there a fish that's literally nipping at it? Because if there's a clownfish rubbing on it, if there's a flame angel or a coral beauty that's taking little bites, that would make it not want to open up. But I'd love to have a Goniopora myself. It's one I've never had much luck with. Jamie says Mark just turned off multiple skimmers without even realizing it. Turn off all your skimmers, Alexa. All right, today is Water Test Saturday. I will be testing my tank today. That will be tonight's Reef Diary. And I want to see where all my water parameters are because it's been, it's been a week. And water tests save lives. If you test your water now before things go wrong, you can catch something early and make the slight course correction rather than suddenly having to do triage on your tank to do all this stuff to get it where it was and losing all that time of all that good growth that now is all going up in smoke before your eyes because you weren't staying on top of testing. Testing is important. Doesn't mean you need to overreact, but you need to know what the numbers are. As long as you know what they are, even if they're bad numbers, you know what they are, then as you're looking in your reef, you can say, okay, well, granted my nitrates are high, that could explain this. Or my phosphates are high, that's why I'm dealing with algae. Or my alkaline usually is this, but it was a little bit low. Maybe I should change what I'm dosing. I mean, you can start thinking where if you just look at it and say, everything's fine, and you don't know, then when things go wrong, you're going to be doing the same thing anyway. You're going to be testing anyway, trying to figure out what on earth went wrong. You're like, oh my God, I wish I'd known this sooner. That's why we test every Saturday. So I highly recommend that to you. I please encourage you to listen and obey. Just do what Milev does. Test your water every week. I hope you guys